The stars above Earth glittered like scattered diamonds as the deep space. Array Alpha 9 quietly rotated on the dark side of the moon, listening to the endless silence of the universe till that silence was broken. A low priority alert flashed. Read on a monitor in Control Room B, drawing the attention of technician Ria Voss. At first, she thought it was a software glitch. The signal was weak, fractured, and buried under cosmic radiation, but it repeated with haunting regularity. After 2 hours of decryption and pattern analysis, Ria called her supervisor. The signal wasn't natural. It was a message. Within 12 hours, top analysts from Earth's United Fleet Command had gathered at the orbital headquarters above New Geneva. The audio played on a loop, static, interwoven with an alien voice, trembling with fear, pleading in a language just barely understood. A translator, AI, reconstructed the meaning. This is the Varelian Commonwealth. Our colonies fall. Our skies burn. Zarkith bring death. If you hear us, Earth, you are our last hope. The room fell silent. No one had ever heard of the Varelians or the Zarkith. Alien life was known, of course, but mostly distant, uninterested in humanity's corner of the galaxy. Still, Earth had spent the last 2 centuries preparing for contact, building fleets, training officers, and developing weapons no one had dared to use. The Council of Worlds dismissed the signal as a trap or a lost cause, but Earth remembered its own history, its wars, its tyrants, and those who stood alone and called for help. Admiral Lenara Gray, Supreme Commander of Task Force Titan, stood before the United Command Council and said, just 4 words, "We will answer it." And the room rose to its feet. Orders moved fast. Task Force Titan, Earth's most elite battle group, was activated for the first time in 41 years. 12 Dreadnought-class warships, hundreds of escort cruisers, stealth corvettes, and drone carriers prepared for deployment. They were not going to observe. They were going to fight. Each ship was armed with IO-assisted targeting, rail cannons that could rip moons apart, and adaptive shields. At the center of it all was the USS Aegis, the flagship of Admiral Gray herself. On the eve of launch, Gray walked the observation deck of the Aegis, watching her fleet assemble across the vastness of space. They called it the Deadliest fleet for a reason, not because it had fought the most battles, but because no one dared to challenge it. Gray knew the odds. The Zarketh could be anything: monsters, machines, conquerors, or worse. But the Varelians had called for help. That alone was reason enough. As the engines roared to life and the stars stretched and twisted into light-speed tunnels, humanity crossed a line. They were no longer alone in the galaxy. And for the first time in centuries, a Terran warfleet launched not for conquest, but to protect the helpless aboard the Aegis. Silence reigned except for the quiet hum of hyperspace. Gray studied the signal one more time. In the background of the Varelian message, beneath the panic and despair, was something else: a sound, like crying, distant but real. A child, perhaps, a family watching their world fall. It was not just a military mission anymore. It was a promise. Humanity had been called. It would not be found wanting. The moment Task Force Titan exited hyperspace, the crew of the USS Aegis saw a nightmare unfold before their Eza Varelian colony station. It's torn apart and burning in the cold dark, surrounded by floating debris and twisted metal, while a group of alien ships circled like vultures, firing on anything that moved. Admiral Lenara Gray stood on the command deck, calm but focused, as red alert alarms filled the ship and tactical screens lit up with enemy positions, each one marked as Zarketh-class vessels. They were sleek, black, and alive-looking, as if they had grown in a lab instead of being built. Their movements precise and cruel, targeting refugee shuttles as if they were sport. "Shields up," Gray said, her voice steady. bring weapons online, and deploy defense drones. And at her command, the fleet moved like a single giant machine. 4 ships raced forward, flanking the Aegis, while drones swarmed out, like silver insects, forming a wall between the fleeing Varelian ships and the attackers. Without waiting for negotiation, the Zarketh opened fire. The space between the two forces exploded in light and fury. Plasma beams, kinetic shells, and missile bursts collided mid-space, shaking even the massive dreadnoughts of Earth's fleet. The USS Oberon took a glancing hit on its side, and debris scattered in a slow spiral, but it held position. The Varelians, whose ships were elegant but clearly not built for war, tried to flee, their engines glowing with strain, but 2 were too slow. Caught in the Zarketh crossfire, they spun out and broke apart. Grey clenched her fists, then gave the order that shifted the battle. Full counter-strike. Target command ships first. The Terran AI quickly analyzed enemy patterns, identifying weak points, and Earth's fleet responded with terrifying power. Rail cannon shot from the Aegis tore through a Zarketh cruiser like a hot knife through ice, its pieces drifting apart. In eerie silence, the corvettes cloaked and darted into enemy lines, disabling a destroyer from within using microdrones that melted systems from the inside out. The enemy ships faltered, caught off guard by the human strategy and aggression. But they did not run. They turned and regrouped faster than expected and charged again. Grey narrowed her eyes as the Zarketh tried to surround her lead ships, cutting them off from the refugees. But humanity had trained for chaos. Commander Reyes, aboard the USS Hammerfall, broke formation and rammed a Zarketh frigate head-on, slicing it in half, then spun into a wild arc, releasing torpedoes that detonated a second. Space around them was full of color and destruction, like a violent storm trapped in a glass ball. And through it all, Grey kept watch, tracking not just the enemy, but the condition of the terrified Varelians behind them. One of their larger refugee cruisers lost power and drifted helplessly. 2 Zarketh ships closed in like wolves sensing prey. But before they could fire, a squadron of Terran fighters swept in and lit them up with precision strikes, tearing off armor plating and rupturing engines. The Varelians, watching from their windows, saw Earth's ships stand between them and death, and they sent out a simple signal: thank you. The battle began to turn, slowly at first, then with certainty, as more Zarketh ships were destroyed or forced to retreat. One by one, they pulled back into the shadows, vanishing without warning, leaving only burning wreckage and silence. The Terran fleet held position, scanning the debris field for traps or survivors, while Grey ordered medevac drones to begin rescuing Varelian life pods. Hours later, the ambassador of the Varelians, a tall being with silver eyes and shimmering skin named Kirith Var, was brought aboard the Aegis. He bowed deeply, his voice trembling with gratitude and grief, and told Grey what the signal could not. The Zarketh had already taken 5 worlds, killed billions, and showed no signs of stopping. They sterilized planets, erasing all life, claiming it was their right as the chosen species. When Grey asked why they attacked the Varelians, who were peaceful scientists and explorers, Kirith answered softly, because we could not stop them. Grey walked away from the meeting in silence, but her decision was clear before she even reached the bridge. This mission had changed. Akaze would not just defend refugees, it would strike back. The Terran fleet was no longer here to assist. It was here to fight. And far beyond, in the dark corners of the galaxy, Zarketh began to realize something strange and new. A small blue planet, once considered primitive and irrelevant, had arrived, and it was not afraid of war. In the deep silence of space, after the first brutal encounter, Task Force Titan began Operation Iron Dawn, offensive plan designed not just to protect, but to cripple the Zarketh war machine before it reached another peaceful world. Admiral Lenara Grey stood at the helm of the USS Aegis, her eyes fixed on the holly map, showing key Zarka's supply routes. Each marked in red, pulsing like blood through the veins of a giant beast. They couldn't stop the Zarkath everywhere, but if they hit the right places at the right time, they could slow them, starve them, and send a message across the stars that humanity would not play defense forever. Their first target was a fuel station orbiting a dying star in Sector Juna 7. Guarded by automated Zarkath drones and a small fleet of supply escorts, never expecting visitors till the sky tore open. Task Force Titan dropped out of hyperspace. In perfect formation, shields raised and weapons hot, the Aegis at the center, like a lion among wolves. The Zarkath drones moved fast, but they weren't smart, not like human AIs, which adapted every second, tracking enemy vectors and predicting attack patterns. Within minutes, the space around the station became a graveyard of spinning metal, as rail cannons and torpedoes turned Zarkath ships into dust. Then came the precision strike stealth corvettes, zipped past the wreckage and planted charges on the station's core, setting off a chain reaction that turned the fuel hub into a miniature sun, the explosion lighting up the dark for 1,000 kilometers. Before the echo of destruction faded, Gray gave the next order, sending the fleet toward 2 more enemy depots, each one deeper into hostile space, each attack more daring than the last. Human ships hit fast and disappeared like ghosts, never staying long, never giving the Zarkath time to react, and slowly, panic began to spread among the enemy ranks. Intercepted comes revealed confusion, surprise, even fear. The Zarkath weren't used to being hunted. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, alien species that had once doubted Earth now watched in silence as reports came in of impossible victories, as human weapons and tactics shocked war-hardened strategists. Heaving Galadeck broadcast network began to follow the Terran fleet, showing holovids of their swift attacks and explosive exits. Humanity fights like fire, one Varelian commentator said, fast, spreading, and hard to control. Amoral. Gray knew fire alone would not win the war, only precision, unity, and boldness would. When she received word that the Zarkath were amassing forces near a planetary forge world, trying to build new dreadnoughts, she made a choice that stunned her officers. She would strike it head-on, even though it was deep in Zarka's territory. It was risky, but if they succeeded, it would be a blow the enemy could not hide or recover from quickly. The fleet entered the system cloaked in sensor-scrambling fields, slipping past patrol lines and emerging just above the blackened world of Theric 9, where Zarkath factories burned day and night and towers of steel pumped out endless weapons. Within seconds, Earth's fleet opened fire, focusing all their power on the defense satellites and hangars, sending blast waves across the surface. A sky filled with smoke turned to fire as explosions broke out in every direction. Factories cracked open, power grids failed, and orbital docks collapsed under the weight of Terran bombardment. The Zarkath tried to launch a counterforce, but they were too late. Half their fleet still sat in dry dock, unfinished and helpless. Commander Reyes led the assault wing personally, guiding bombers through thick anti-air and crippling the last remaining shield generators on the planet. When the strike was complete, the forge world was silent, its smoke drifting into space, and Earth's ships vanished again without leaving a trace but ruin behind. It was the third major strike in under a week, and now the galaxy was paying attention. Diplomats from minor systems began contacting the United Fleet Command, asking about alliances, hoping for protection, realizing that Earth had become a symbol of resistance. Gray received dozens of messages, some grateful, some fearful, and one chilling an intercepted Zarkath communication warning of a new enemy they had underestimated, calling humans the broken species that never stops rising. And yet, even as Earth celebrated the victories, Gray felt the shadow of something larger coming. The Zarkath would not accept these losses quietly, and the deeper they cut, the more likely they were to wake something even worse. Fears were confirmed when long-range probes detected the movement of a massive Sarkeeth capital ship. Larger than anything Earth had faced the blood rain, a war dreadnought known only in stories and myths. Now headed straight for the Kepler drift, where Task Force Titan had set up a forward base. Gray knew the battle ahead would not be another hit and run it, would be a storm unlike anything before. And only one fleet would come out of it alive. The Kepler drift hung in space like a shattered crown in ancient field of asteroid remains, broken moons, and forgotten wreckage, all floating near a neutron star that pulsed like a silent drum. It was here, among the shadows and chaos, that Admiral Lenara Gray had positioned Task Force Titan's forward base, using the dense cover and magnetic interference to hide her forces from prying Sarkeeth's sensors. But now the hiding was over, and the storm had come. Reports confirmed if the Sarkeeth dreadnought blood rain was approaching. Its gravity wake warping space itself. Its arrival shaking the core of every long-range scanner like a thunderclap through a calm sea. Never before had any human ship faced something so massive, so heavily armored, so coldly intelligent. A ship that didn't just carry weapons, but was one its whole, a living alloy that pulsed with dark energy. Its weapons carved from star-forged matter. Its AI rumored to be ancient, evolved beyond emotion, guided only by a hunger to destroy. Gray stood before her fleet and gave a simple speech, calm and direct, telling every captain, every crew, that they would not retreat. Not from this, not here, not now, because if they ran, the galaxy would follow, and if they stood, others might find courage too. Across the shattered field, Earth's ships scattered into formations like pieces of a chessboard, hiding behind asteroids, anchoring to floating ruins, setting traps and decoys, while drone swarms waited in silence, powered down like sleeping bees before battle. Then, without sound, without warning, blood rain arrived, sliding out of subspace like a shadow made real, its size blocking the stars, its presence making even the bravest soldiers feel small. Thousands of Sarkeeth fighters launched from its guana sides like parasites, spreading through the drift, searching for the humans. And so the crucible began, not with the charge, but with the whisper of movement. Corvettes struck first, ambushing scouts, then disappearing again, luring enemies into kill zones where mines exploded in violent light. The battle unfolded like a nightmare, slow and then fast, scattered and then sharp. Fighters chasing each other through twisting debris paths, cruisers turning whole asteroids into cover fire as railguns fired through solid rock. Gray gave commands with precision, her mind focused like steel, guiding the Aegis through the chaos toward the heart of the enemy line, knowing she had to be the anchor. Commander Reyes, piloting the Hammerfall, led the heavy assault wing in a full frontal charge, drawing fire and forcing the enemy to expose their core positions. Even as ships on both sides felt some cracking open in silent explosions, some spiraling out into the dark. The Terrans held formation, refusing to break. The Sarkeeth did not retreat, did not hesitate, but neither did they adapt well to the madness of the drift, where human strategy thrived in unpredictability. It was here that Gray made her move, activating Phase Sigma, the hidden plan to board the blood rain directly and disable its power matrix from within. A team of Terran special forces, cloaked and hardened for deep void entry, launched from the underside of the Aegis, slipping through gaps in the enemy line using stealth pods and grav hooks. While the fleet fought in the open, these shadow soldiers made contact with the dreadnought, landing like insects on its armor, threading their way in and vanishing into the belly of the beast. Outside, the battle reached its peak. Explosions lit the drift like a second sun, and both sides bled metal and fire. Hammerfall lost an engine and kept fighting, drifting, but defiant. The Vanguard took a direct hit and sacrificed itself to shield a group of medevac ships. Gray, watching it all unfold, refused to flinch as her own ship shook from a glancing blow, sparks raining from the ceiling of the bridge. Then, a single coded signal arrived Sabers in the core, meaning the boarding team had reached the power nexus deep inside Blood Rain. Their mission: plant a zero-point implosion device and escape before it detonated. Minutes passed like hours, and during that time, the Terran fleet gave everything they had to hold the line, to keep the enemy distracted, to give the team just a few more seconds. When the timer finally appeared on Gray's screen, 60 seconds, 2 detonations, she ordered full retreat from the Dreadnought's radius. The ships pulled back, wounded but alive, some leaving behind trails of fuel and fire. And then, with a flash so bright it burned shadows onto hulls, the core of Blood Rain collapsed inward, folding on itself like a dying star, before erupting in a wave of light and force that vaporized everything within 3 kilometers. The shockwave rolled through the drift, turning wreckage into ash, flipping empty ships, and cutting through silence with a final scream of energy. And then there was nothing. No signal from the Dreadnought, no enemy comms, only static. Gray sat still, eyes closed for a moment, then opened them to the reports some of the team had made it back. Not all, but enough. And the Blood Rain was gone, its destruction sending a ripple through the war that would echo far beyond Kepler. Earth had not just survived, the Crucible had won, and in doing so, reminded the galaxy of a simple truth: humanity, when cornered, fights not for glory, but for each other. That is what makes them unstoppable. The destruction of the Zarkith's Dreadnought Blood Rain at Kepler Drift sent shockwaves across the stars, not just through space, but through minds and hearts, worlds that had lived in fear suddenly paused, uncertain for the first time in decades, as news spread that the Terrans, once dismissed as newcomers, had destroyed a vessel thought to be invincible. Across the galactic network, reports poured in from traders, diplomats, and observers, showing Earth's battered but victorious fleet returning from the Crucible. Not in silence, but with heads high and flags flying, the halls of power on distant worlds, council leaders watched the footage of Admiral Lanara Gray speaking to her people, stating that humanity would not stop at defense. It would now stand with those who needed help, not because it wanted war, but because it had seen what happened when good people stayed silent. The words rippled like thunder. And then came the calls, first from small colonies and trade outposts, asking for protection. Then from entire civilizations who had once ignored Earth, now asking for alliances. The Varelians, the first to be sieved, stepped forward and offered shared technology, shipyards, and knowledge once kept secret. The Varnak, once neutral, sent battlecruisers to join Earth's growing fleet. Even the cautious Rothan League agreed to open borders and intelligence sharing. And so, in orbit above New Mars, leaders from 23 species met with Earth's diplomats, and the Terran Alliance was born not as an empire, but as a pact built on defense, cooperation, and unity against the Zarkith threat. Back on Earth, people cheered not for conquest of a hope, but their sacrifices at Kepler Drift had meant something, that their fallen had not died in vain. As the weeks passed, Alliance warships began joint patrols, mixing crews from different worlds, learning each other's tactics, customs, and strengths, and the fleet grew stronger, faster, smarter. Admiral Gray, now promoted to High Admiral of the Alliance Core Fleet, oversaw construction of new command stations, shipyards, and training academies on the edge of neutral space. But not everyone welcomed the rise of the Alliance. A cold world near the galactic rim, Zarkith warlords gathered in secret, furious and confused. How had the humans, so young and fragile, shattered their legend? Their pride could not accept the loss, and so a plan began to form a new kind of war. Not through brute force, but through fear and sabotage. Spies were sent to disrupt supply. Lines, fleets vanished near strange signals, and colonies began receiving threats written in dead languages. Gray saw the signs and knew what it meant. The Zarkith would return, not in the open, but from the shadows. She called a meeting of the Alliance Council, laying out a bold proposal: Operation Beacon, a system-wide initiative to defend key planets, expand sensor networks, and strike first when needed. The plan passed, but barely some allies feared escalation. Others doubted Earth's leadership, but when a Rothon colony went dark overnight, leaving only a smoking crater and strange bioresidue, doubt turned into resolve. Fleets were dispatched, listening stations activated, and elite strike teams trained for fast response. Everywhere the Alliance flag flew, people began to believe again, not just in Earth, but in unity. Even back on Earth, where many had once feared becoming involved in alien wars, now supported the mission, sending supplies, building ships, and broadcasting messages of strength across the stars. Children in distant colonies grew up learning names like Reyes and Gray, not as warriors, but as symbols of courage. Still, Gray could not rest. She knew the Zarkith were planning something bigger, something that would test everything the Alliance had built. Her dreams were filled with images of fire and silence, of stars blinking out one by one, of a darkness that moved like a wave. One night, her worst fear came true. Deep space scanners picked up a signal, faint but unmistakable, from a system thought uninhabitable, one she had seen on a report long ago, marked with a single word: origin. The signal was not a cry for help, but a challenge, broadcast in a mix of Zarketh and machine language, stating simply, "Return if you dare." She knew then the final war was coming, not for survival, but for the soul of the galaxy, and Earth, at the heart of the Alliance, would stand on the front lines again, not just as soldiers, but as a people who had chosen to rise when no one else would. The stars over the origin system burned cold and sharp as the Terran Alliance fleet arrived, stretched across space in perfect formation. Each ship a blade of light, ready for war, led by the great flagship Aegis Prime, where High Admiral Lenara Gray stood at the command deck, her face calm, but her eyes locked on the dark world below, a dead planet once ruled by the Zarketh, now stirring again with strange signals, twisted frequencies, and deep, pulsing energy, unlike anything recorded. The silence across the fleet was not fear, but focus, for they all knew this was the endgame, the final battle where either the Zarketh would fall or the Alliance would shatter. The enemy had called them here, to their birthplace, a planet scarred by ancient wars and buried weapons, surrounded by rings of broken satellites and shattered bones of long-dead civilizations. All proof of what the Zarkith had destroyed in their hunger for control. Gray gave the signal, and the fleet began descent, not in chaos, but in waves, vanguard cruisers sweeping debris fields, stealth ships mapping gravity traps, and drones lighting a path through the mine-laced orbits. And then the enemy rose from the dark Zarkith war forms, larger than ever seen, wrapped in living armor and shielded by strange energy fields that screamed when touched by scanners. Their dreadships erupting from caverns in the planet's crust, like monsters breaking from chains. The battle started not with words, but with light beams, torpedoes, plasma bursts, all crashing together in a deadly ballet over the surface of origin. Terran and Alliance forces moved as one, every maneuver drilled, every counterattack anticipated. But the Zarkith were fighting with desperation now, with fury, sending swarms of hive ships and weaponized moons toward the fleet. Aegis Prime took the lead, flanked by the Varelian destroyer, Lareth, and the Routhan carrier shield of Dawn, each carrying thousands of brave souls who had sworn to stand here together, against tyranny. On the surface, strike teams landed near ancient Zarkith ruins that pulsed with life again, guarded by biomechanical horrors. But Reyes, now captain of the elite Black Saber unit, led the charge, cutting through wave after wave of defenders as they fought toward the control core buried beneath miles of rock and metal. Above them, the sky was firefighters darting between burning debris, cruisers exploding in silence, their last signals carrying words of honor. Gray coordinated every unit, never once losing control, her voice steady even as part of the third wave fleet was swallowed by a black hole pulse from a Zarkith grav weapon. Then came the moment they all feared. A massive Zarkath entity, more fortress than ship, rose from the planet's core, covered in ancient runes and howling with stored power, its weapons capable of splitting a moon. The fleet's focused fire on it, but nothing pierced its shell. Not even the strongest torpedoes until Reyes and his team reached the core chamber, finding not a control center, but a living heart, the true brain of the Zarkith war machine, grown over centuries, fed by stolen minds. The team planted the last of their quantum charges, timed with Gray's final assault. One chance, one moment to finish it all. Gray ordered a full, focused barrage, every ship targeting the rising fortress as Reyes sent the signal. Charges armed. 20 seconds. Fire erupted across the sky as the Zarkith fortress lit up with flame, its shields cracking as the explosions within tore through its foundation. The beast screamed as it fell, and with it, the Zarkith resistance began to crumble, one by one. Their ships went dark, their formations broke, and the war machines that had once conquered galaxies now drifted, lost and leaderless. Silence returned to origin, broken only by the breath of survivors and the soft pings of returning drones. In that silence, Gray finally let herself sit, shoulders heavy, heart still racing, but alive. The Alliance had won not just a battle, but a future forged in fire, held by unity, and sealed in the ashes of the tyrants who once ruled the stars. Across the galaxy, from deep colonies to high cities, people cheered not for war, but for peace earned through courage. Earth, once seen as the young world, now stood as the light that led others out of the dark. And the story of humanity's rise, born from a single distress call, had become the legend of the Terran Alliance, the alliance that answered, that fought, and that never gave up.